Okay, so this is part three. Let's go ahead and understand the role assertion plays in test automation. So in part one and two, we have created a project, installed Vibium, and added our first code implementation, ran our test just to make sure that everything works perfectly fine. We have also separated all our tests into three different scenarios, scenario one, two, and three, and we took a couple of screenshots and stored them in a folder called screenshots, just so that we can be a little bit more organized. Now, in test automation, we want to ensure that we are verifying that the application on that test behaves as expected, hence why we are using assertions because assertion allows us to do a check or a validation. And what this means is that it decides if our test pass or fails. Okay, and then by doing so, we are comparing two behaviors, an actual behavior versus an expected behavior. And if these two behaviors or these two values are matching, then our test passes. But if they don't match, then it fails. So that implies again that without assertion, our automation would only be doing actions. It wouldn't verify anything. So let's see how we can assert right here. So we'll keep it very simple um, because this is still the early stages of Vibium. So first thing first, we want to import our assertion library or our assertion dependency. So I'm going to type const assert, and I'm going to use node assert. And one of the ways that we can use assert is using assert.ok. And what it does is basically, if you remember, for those who understand API, if you run a typical GET request and you get a response, if all things work okay, you get 200 okay, meaning, you know, everything is okay and everything is good, no issues. So you can also see that clearly on a browser. Let's say, for instance, we navigate to Google. So I'm going to type google.com here, and here on the search page, you're going to type, let's say, football, for instance. And before I press enter, I'm going to open the network tabs. So right here in the network tab, if I select football and I press enter, so it's going to give me information about football on the actual page. But in the network tabs, a couple of API calls has been sent, which is basically a GET request. And what you want to do is to identify the call you made. So what we did was to type uh, football, wasn't it? So I'm going to look for, should be somewhere here, so right there, search football. And if I click on it, you see right here that the request method says get because you're trying to retrieve an information, and the status code says 200 OK. Okay, so similarly, we are going to do that in our test automation just to verify that the information that we requested for was successful. Okay, so I'm going to write here as do an assertion, type in assert.ok, and then for assert OK, I'm going to type true, and I can put a message here to say uh, I say tests is running okay, something like that. It doesn't matter. You can put any message of your choice, and that should be fine. So right now, if I run my tests, you will see that the browser should open and it should enter the username and password log into the application, and that should be the end of the test. So we'll see in the terminal what the message is in the terminal. So I'll go over to the terminal. As you can see right here, one test was executed, one test passed, and that's the duration of the test execution. So no issues at all with our assertion, and we can now maybe change that a little bit and see maybe how we can assert a URL or the page title, and probably maybe just assert an element on the page, and we'll leave it right there. So to assert the URL, the first thing I'm going to show you is uh, if we come over to Swag Labs page and you come over to console, you can see right here that if you type document.title, it will give you the title of the page. And similarly, if you type document.url, and it will give you the URL of the page. Okay, so we are now going to use that in our assertion. So I'm going to change this to strict equal, and then I type vibe.evaluate, and I'm going to put return document.title. That's it. And that will help us to get the URL. And no, actually, this is title. So I'm going to put document.url, and this will give us the URL as our expected, while this is the actual. And if both of them doesn't match, it's going to throw us this error message. So let's run the test again, and I can actually print out the actual URL as well. So I'll say a certain URL, and I'll put, let me just copy this right here and put it there. Oops. Yeah. So let's run the test now and see what happens. So as you can see, the browser opened and we were able to log in successfully. And then if we look at the terminal, here's our last test execution. Everything still worked perfectly fine. And now if you look at our log information, you see a certain URL, and that's the URL that we captured during the test execution. So similar to how we have done the URL, we are going to do the same for the title. So I'm going to change the title to this, and I'll change this as well to the title. And the title, what we are expecting is Swag Lab, and if both of them doesn't match, it's going to be a title is not correct. So if I run that again, everything should be fine. And then I'm going to now maybe make a small modification just to get it to fail. And then we'll see what the messages will display. So that's that. The title should be shown here right now. So you can see Swag Lab is showing here as the title. Okay. So that means our assertion passed. So if we make small modification now, let's say I change the expected to Swag Lab without S, and then the actual is going to capture Swag Labs with S. And let's see if it's going to print out the message. So we're expecting to see this message, title is not correct. Okay, so as you can see, it's trying to do the assertion successfully, but there's been an issue, hence why the username and password wasn't entered on the page. So if I close the browser and I go over to the terminal, you see right here that there is an exception, and it points us to the right point. During test execution, it says title is not correct. So that helps us to confirm that our assertion is working fine. So let's now go ahead and return back the correct expected keyword so we can make sure that our test is working fine. And then we proceed to the next step. So again, we're expecting the browser should open, and this time around it should enter the username and password, and everything should pass. So there we go. So finally, we are going to try and assert that a text on the page um, exists, or that the text matches what we're expecting. So we can use the same example for Swag Lab. Let's say, for instance, we go over to the page, and instead of using documents.title, we can actually identify the class name or the locator for Swag Lab, which, as you can see right here, login underscore logo. And what I'll do, I'll come over here and I'll change uh, this to find, and then I'm going to ask it to find this class and then get me the text of this locator. And this will now act as my actual and comparing it with the expected. And then if both of them doesn't match, it's going to throw me the error as we saw previously. So let's run the test again and see if if everything worked perfectly fine. So there we go. The test ran perfectly fine. And as you can see in the terminal, the test passed, no issues. Again, the title was printed. So this is one way you can use strict equal for your assertion. You can also use assert.ok. I think you can use assert.match as well. You can also assert that a text value matches a certain pattern and so on. So I think we can leave this right here because I don't want this video to be too long. And if you are enjoying this content so far, please subscribe, like, leave me a comment, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.